3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Objective, and today we're going to be talking about the rights of smokers. It's come out that some jurisdiction, some district in England, I believe, is outlawing outdoor smoking, period. What is it? What's a good way to think about this? Obviously, you know, if we're gun-toting lovers of freedom, it's easy to just say, let me smoke where I want, whenever I want. On the flip side of that, there's the sort of like secondhand smoke is the biggest killer in the world, they say, and nobody should be allowed to smoke in their own shower. Those are like kind of the two extreme voices we hear out there. But now I'm going to offer you that we try to look at it a little bit clearer than that. And here to help me with that is a guy who is about as clear as they come. It's Nikos Sotirakopoulos.
Thank you very much, Rucka. So my take on the smoking ban in general is a bit of a peculiar one because I think it's the one topic that has been a turning point culturally in where the West is going. And I know this sounds a bit too exaggerating, but I think it's one topic that includes many of the things that have gone wrong in the way we think. So there are three ways to think about the smoking ban. The one is the so-called common sense way of viewing it, which says, look, smoking is disgusting. It's bad for you. It's bad for the other people. And therefore, basically, the state, it should have banned it probably altogether. But there was this time where people were smoking in the tube or in hospitals, and it was ridiculous. So we're very good that this is not the case anymore and no one's smoking anymore. So the second level, let's say, of thinking on this topic is the so-called pragmatists and most of the liberal think tankers. And when I say liberal, I mean it in the European sense. And they say, look, we understand that smoking is really bad, but there's a slippery slope here. So you start, for example, by banning smoke in airplanes, then and everyone would agree with that, and of course we would agree with that. And then you take a bit more of steps towards banning smoking in more and more places, and then you might find yourself in situations of exaggeration where you even ban smoking outdoors. So our liberal friends will say, let's not take it to extreme. We need to find a central ground, which is, again, what most liberal think tanks do in this country. Or they bring other arguments. They bring the arguments, for example, that it's not good to ban smoking because people then are going to buy, let's say, so for example, if you raise tax on cigarettes, people are going to buy counterfeit cigarettes or cigarettes that are in the black market. Or they will say, look, since you banned smoking in pubs, and this happened in the UK in July 2007, since you banned smoking in pubs, many pubs closed. So they will make this kind of argument. I think both of these arguments are equally bad, because to use the words of Ayn Rand, they are not based on the essence of the topic. They're not based on principles. And actually, Ayn Rand has a very interesting, in one of her articles in the Ayn Rand journals, which I couldn't find the original, but in the companion, there is an elaboration, there's an excerpt of this in a chapter called The Objectivist Epistemology. She says, when you're dealing with a political topic, you might think it's that kind of simple thing where you should see both points of view. But she says, no, it comes down to essence. And what is the essence of the smoking ban? The essence of the smoking ban is not whether you are annoyed by cigarettes. Yes, smoking is annoying. It's not whether it's bad for you. Yes, it is indeed bad for you. It's not whether it has a second-hand effect. All these things, yes, okay. The essence is that this is a huge violation of rights of two parties, not one. The first party whose rights are violated is the pub owner or the restaurant owner, because it's basically telling the restaurant owner, your restaurant is not yours. Your restaurant is mine. So the government poses the rules, and if you follow these rules that change very often and not on clear principles, we might allow you to have your property. The second party whose rights are violated is the customer. And they're violated in a very fundamental way because it's basically telling the customer, your body and your judgment are not yours. You cannot make the right decisions. Therefore, we will make the right decisions for you. And why do I claim that this is such a big topic and I consider it a turning point culturally in the West? Exactly because it's a topic that most people think that, yes, smoking is disgusting. The fact that the smoking bans have passed with so little resistance established something very important. It established that the government now has a role which is also as the arbiter of public health. It's the arbiter of your lifestyle. So in a time where the government and politicians could not find the justification of being the representative of principles or of different ideologies, as it was back in the day, so it was, I think that society should be this way, and the other side should say, no, I think society should be that way. Let's say capitalism versus socialism or whatever. Now it is the reason you need me is because I'm going to tell you what is good for you. And this is what we call the rise of the nanny state. And there is no better example of the rise in the nanny state than the smoking ban. Sorry for my long monologue, but if you add together a violation of property rights, the state establishing itself as let's say, the commissar of public health and public health overriding rights, and also the state undermining your judgment about your decisions, about your health, this is the perfect mix that makes the smoking ban such a negative development in our cultures and societies.
Yeah, I mean, it is true. Smoking is a perfect microcosm for how the overarching state kind of takes control of things. And it's probably true that the gun enthusiasts, especially in America, the reason they won't give up this much, they won't give up on an AR-15, they won't give up on having unlimited guns, is because they saw what happened with smokers. First, smokers were told, go smoke in this half of the restaurant. Then, okay, you need to step outside. Then it became, okay, actually, you need to stand 100 feet away from the restaurant. Then it just became, you can't smoke anywhere on the street. It's just, it's a tough one. It's, I think as Ayn Rand said about hardcore pornography, it's not very inspiring to fight for this. I mean, especially for me, I used to smoke about 10 years ago. I enjoy not having smoke anywhere. I enjoy not smelling like cigarettes at the end of an outing. At the same time, it's not up to me to tell other people what to do, and I'm perfectly free to avoid those people if I want to. And I think the market can definitely, bring about a lower amount of people smoking, or more areas where smoking is banned by private individuals and entities, and to say nothing of the general culture of responsibility that would come about in a freer capitalist country. So a lot fewer people would smoke if they felt this sort of sense of responsibility for their own lives. So there's a number of ways to kind of look at why this is doing much more harm than good. Most importantly, philosophically, it gets us used to the idea. It makes us accept the idea that the government's job is to engineer society, is to nanny us, is to kind of tell us what to do and where to do it. And people will respond, yeah, but then if someone smokes and gets sick, all of us are paying that person's medical bills. And then my response is, well, what are we going to do about that? We've got a problem then, don't we? Maybe it's time to privatize medicine completely. Thank you, Jonathan Honig, for the $2.99 and the picture of the hippopotamus playing air guitar, it looks like.
And that's exactly why the timid liberals will back up, because when you reach the discussion, yes, but my bad habits are influencing the national healthcare system, then they will say, okay, yes, we understand. Therefore, something has to be done. But here's the thing. If something has to be done, now it's a matter of whim, or it's a matter of who has the power, or who has more lobbying power, on whether the something that needs to be done is whether you're going to leave part of the restaurant for smokers, or now that, like the Oxfordshire country saying, no smoking even outside of buildings. And I think it's worth it addressing some common objections to this absolutist point of view. So particularly in Greece, where there is a very strong smoking culture. So a major defense of the smoking ban is, look, the market has failed. Almost every restaurant and cafeteria is actually would allow smoking because many people want to smoke. Therefore, me and my child, don't we have the right to go in a smoke-free area? And the very harsh truth is that the answer there is no. Of course, you have the right to go to somewhere and, I don't know, in your place or someone who provides with this environment, but you don't have a right to a particular environment of a cafeteria that is to your taste. Now, again, I understand I'm an occasional smoker, but I would rather go in non-smoking areas, particularly with my young niece. And if someone is annoyed around me, you know, I don't smoke and all that stuff. This has nothing to do with the fact that I have a quote right to a cafeteria with a clean environment. This is the equivalent of me saying, I have a right to a cafeteria where they play 1950s jazz. I mean, it would be very nice, but I don't have a right to it. The second objection would be, it's not the same because your smoking is harming me. And the question is, what if you know that by entering that cafeteria, you take this responsibility? It's like saying, look, when you enter, let's say, an octagon, when you enter a mixed martial arts gym, you know that there's some implications there, that you might get hurt, that this is a place where we do this thing. Equally, if a cafeteria or a pub says, this is a smoker's pub, you understand that this is the place where I expose myself to that risk. Therefore, no, you don't have a, quote, right to a particular a clean environment or an environment where people don't smoke. You have the right to try to persuade someone to have such a cafeteria. You have the right to open such a cafeteria yourself, to start a business which is non-smoking. But no, you don't have a, quote, right in terms of what other people are going to do with their property. If the pub owner is okay with smoking in the pub, if the employer is okay, and if the employer is not okay, he can find an employer somewhere else. And if the customer is okay, that's a voluntary transaction and no one should have a say on that. And if either we defend this or we peril and in the same way that conservatives and liberals have been very, very bad in defending freedom of property.
Yeah, I mean, once we accept the premise, once we accept the pattern or the idea that the government's job is to do something beyond protecting your rights, now it's turning into the government needs to provide us with a certain environment. And look, if it can be proven that, let's say, secondhand smoke is as lethal as some say, then arguably maybe it should be illegal for me to stand next to you all day smoking and blowing it in your face, or something like that. I mean, there may be something for legal scholars to figure out if there is something to be said about secondhand smoke, but that doesn't mean that smoking out in the middle of the street means you're blowing it is the same as sitting next to somebody all day smoking. Like outdoors is way different than sitting next to them. In an office, for instance.
Sorry, but even indoors, let's say I call my pub the smokers, or the place where someone is puffing smoke in your face. Mm-hmm. If you enter that cafe, then again, that's your problem. And I understand. Yes, maybe if someone follows you all day around, but then that person is a stalker. Like the problem is not that person is blowing smoke in your face.
Of course, every context is everything. Obviously, there's also, like you said, MMA, where you go and you can assault one another. That's not the same as assaulting somebody outside of that context. Everything is contextual, but arguably, let's say there may be. It's conceivable that there is a case where your smoking is endangering somebody else, and that there may be a law that applies to that. But I think it would be nowhere close to what we see, where just smoking on the beach is banned, smoking in the street, walking down the street is banned. I mean, it would be nothing like that. And certainly if you have a pub where you wish to allow smoking, then of course that should be perfectly fine, as far as I can understand legal philosophy. Thank you, CJ Vermeer, for the $2 Canadian. Thank you, Jonathan Honig, for the $4.99. He says, a business isn't owned by the public just because it's used by the public. Yeah, absolutely right. This conflation of public and private property is huge. And who does it the most these days? Honestly, it looks like the right, the Dennis Pragers of the world, the way they're treating Google like a public utility, like a public park. Now, part of the problem here is, one of the premises that most people have accepted in the world we live in is the very concept, or maybe I should say anti-concept, of public property. It makes no sense. It's a contradiction in terms. Property, by definition, is private, isn't it? So to speak of public property, it introduces a myriad of problems that'll only get worse, and it'll end up eating into the concept of property, where to the point where your actual private property, privately owned property, is dispensed with by the people around you and by the government, disposed of. And so-called public property is sacrosanct. There, the laws are going to be untouchable, and you'd better not violate them. So you can see what happens when you allow anti-concepts, irrational ideas into your constitution with a lowercase c. So,
and it's not, that's a very interesting point. It reminds me the fallacy of Proudhon, who said property is theft, which makes no sense because theft is the stealing of a property. So what you said is very
interesting. That's the stealing of a concept, we would say.
Yeah, it's a stealing of and what you said, I've never put it this way. But I would say that beyond the property rights, it says something very, very worrying about our culture, this idea that the government should save you from yourself. And in a way, the public health zeal that we've seen in the West in the last 20 years was a precursor to what we saw in COVID and the lockdowns. I don't think that the lockdowns would fly as easily as they did in the 60s or in the 70s. And notice that when people are actually attacking smoking, they say, oh, what do you want a society of like we are in the Mad Men TV series where, so it's almost as if there's this sense of life which says that, well, people have the responsibility to do what they do, and sometimes they might be risk takers, or they might judge their values and say, okay, I understand it's bad for my health, but I gain this. All this vision of, let's say, the sovereign individual is very, very off-putting nowadays for authorities. And notice, I found something very interesting in a quote by one of the public health commissars. I mean, his title is not commissar, but I think the political system he belongs to, that's what his title should be. So he says, it's not about telling people not to smoke, parentheses. That's exactly what it is about. If you tell people you cannot smoke outside of a restaurant, it's exactly you telling people that they cannot smoke. Continue quote. It's about moving and creating an environment in which not smoking is encouraged. Parenthesis again by me. You know how non-smoking is encouraged? By going to people and say, I encourage you not to smoke. Not by using the state force to actually intervene in the property rights of the restaurant owner. Continue quote. And and people are empowered to do so. Notice here the kindergarten language. Empowered to do so. You're empowered not to smoke. First of all, this doesn't even make sense. Like, you're empowered not to smoke. If I don't want to smoke, I don't smoke. What does it mean you're empowered not to smoke by banning smoke in someone else's property that you voluntarily have chosen to use? So please, people, if you hate smoking, I know there's so many people, they have lost beloved ones because of smoking. Smoking is disgusting. I get all that. I agree with all that. Still, though, this should not be left uncriticized. If you unpack a bit deeper on what is happening here, you should be worried even if smoking disgusts you and even if you find it the most horrible thing on earth. Because it's this kind of mentality and this kind of power lust that gets unchecked.
Yeah, that kind of thought process you described, where they say there's like a double negative, like we're empowering you to not smoke. It's this whole there's like a philosophical kind of tendency in that, and especially these modern, maybe the existentialists or whoever. I think Rand refers to the reification of the zero, kind of treating nothing as though it's a thing. So then the opposite of nothing is starting with a negative and then kind of then the positive basically becomes the equivalent of nothing. Just like I said, when you create something called public property, then actual property becomes disposable, and the public property now is treated like untouchable holiness. I think similarly, when you treat the negative as though it's something, you end up kind of treating actual reality and actual existence with less seriousness, if that makes some sense, I hope.
It does make sense.
Yeah, and also I think they banned or are banning menthol cigarettes in the US. I saw a headline saying that Biden was doing this by executive order, but maybe he did it via some other process. Maybe the FDA did it, on their own, but Biden encouraged it. I don't know, but I mean, that's huge. When I was a smoker, menthol cigarettes were it. I thought regular non-menthol cigarettes were like just lighting paper to me. It was not. It was not. So I would be very upset if they had banned menthol cigarettes. A lot of people, especially urban folks, really, really like their Newports. So, I mean, this is a violation of people's rights. Consenting adults have a right to smoke what they want. So interestingly, as marijuana is becoming legalized and normalized everywhere, it does look like cigarettes are going to be banned at some point. I don't know when, but it's going to happen. I mean, drugs are, many of them, illegal. Marijuana a short time ago was illegal. I think it's very realistic to expect that cigarettes will at some point in America be banned. It's hard to imagine Europeans consenting to that because
unfortunately, the smoking ban has passed and has been applied to places that you'd never expect it. So Paris, for example, like culturally Paris, you think of, I don't know, Sartre, all these ideas, the 60s, the intellectuals with the cigarette. That's, in a way, I can understand it's a caricature. But at the same time, if you would tell someone that Paris is going to be a smoke-free environment, at least indoors, no one would believe it. And yet it happened. So again, this is how freedom is lost. And I know it sounds dramatic. Oh, this is how freedom is lost. But that's exactly what is happening here. Okay, we have a bit
and it's
two
all,
more.
And it's all now I forgot what I was going to say. It's the philosophical point. It's that once you allow the government to impede on your rights, impede on your life this way, it's only going to be used. It's a tendency. Also, Daniel in the regular chat says menthol cigarettes are already banned in Europe. So I just wanted to mention that. And anyway, should I read the super chats or do you want to read? All right. CJ with $2 Canadian, which is worth, let's say, virtually nothing. I'm joking. He says, can the government ban anime because of the damage it's doing? From your lips to God's ears, I say. I'm joking, of course. Yes, they probably will. At someday. Sammy, especially with this anti-Chinese direction that Americans are going. And I know anime is Japanese, and I'm just saying if that's the direction the culture's moving. Sammy is bored again with £4.99. Says, I've been verbally attacked on more than one occasion just for lighting up. Well, go ahead.
Can I say something on that?
Yes.
So, first of all, I didn't realize Sam is bored again. And I thought, is our producer telling us that someone is bored and like they don't like the show or something? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Sammy, I totally understand what you mean, because in this country, at least, cigarette has been part of this, let's say, culture war, right? So the educated middle classes, they see smoking with disdain. Of course, you go to a middle class party, there's weed everywhere and weed is cool. But cigarette it's like, oh, it's only these. So basically in the UK, cigarette smokers are either like these working class people who voted for Brexit and they're not educated and they're also a bit racist and not like us, or like the super rich who can do whatever they want. So this is like the cultural thing. So it is a symbol of, let's say, middle class snobbery that you look down to smokers.
Yeah, the analytic synthetic dichotomy says in Germany, the left suggested that one should ban driving in cities, that they should ban driving in cities. I guess that's the ideal. Some of them want to go. They want the cities to just be public transportation. And then in the suburbs and countryside, you can drive if you need to. I mean, it's not inconceivable that these things will come about. Philosophy is important, and all we see is people lamenting life before capitalism. Everywhere we look, the left, the right, all we see is people lamenting that the Industrial Revolution brought about all of these problems. Mark and I have mentioned an author named Jonah Goldberg, who wrote a book I read many years ago called Liberal Fascism. And he talks about the history of progressives bringing fascistic tendencies to America. And of course, quote, we're all fascists now. It's the left and the right. And he has a newer book that Mark was reading a short time ago. And in the book that I read, Liberal Fascism, Goldberg talks about how smoking is a great example of how the state kind of flexes its power. Interesting to see the fate of Goldberg. He was one of the more principled types of conservatives. As the era of Trump came about, I think he was very opposed to Trump. But as time passes, as the sort of new right becomes the norm, I wonder if the sort of Jonah Goldberg type of conservative will become so much more scarce. And hopefully, if objectivism continues to grow at the rate as it is, slowly but surely, who knows if us and the sort of never Trumpers might end up eclipsing at some point in the future. If you dream it, you can do it. And maybe on that day, Goldberg can look over at what he knew about and was not willing to commit to. That is the philosophy of Ayn Rand, which would have been much more effective in standing up against fascism. So your time will come, Goldberg. I'll see you in hell, my friend. Anything else before we jump over to Clubhouse? I don't know if we have any upcoming announcements.
Well, an interesting story with menthol cigarettes is that Helmut Schmidt, which was a chancellor in Germany, he was rumored to have hoarded hundreds, not of packets, hundreds of cartons of menthol cigarettes. Anyway, here's a message, by the way, to the authorities. Coming from a country where you can find farmers farming organic tobacco, good luck trying to ban it all together. All you're going to do is you're going to hopefully make people realize that slippery slope is true, and we shouldn't oppose these things on slippery slope. As Ayn Rand said, and again, I was very hurried in this. She gives the example of how to approach an issue on the principles on page 276 of a companion to Ayn Rand. Of course, it's all over Rand's work, but there she says, particularly, what's the principled approach, and what's the perception? Like, oh, I don't like cigarette, therefore I'm gonna... Anyway, so yes, slippery slope is real, but we shouldn't oppose smoking on slippery slope. Smoking ban on slippery slope. We should oppose it on principles. And because we haven't done so, we see how freedoms are receding. And now, basically, freedoms are a privilege that has not been taken away yet. Okay, so what's happening next? Shall I say or you say?
I treated your rhetorical question as though it's an actual question. I just want to mention, even pissed off smoking addicts won't be able to preserve their right to smoke without philosophy. So at the end of the day, we're all heading the same place if we don't take philosophy seriously. Back to you.
And fun fact, or maybe not fun for me. The smoking ban was the first thing ever to make me challenge the idea that the state should be omnipotent. It was around 2006. I was on my fullest Stalinist, like Marxist stuff. And it was the first thing I said, wait a minute, why? Why doesn't the pub owner, his pub is not his. But don't I kind of like being in the pub and having this deal with the pub owner? It's your pub, let me smoke. Well, forget it. No, the state is good. But it was the first thing that gave me the glimpse of doubt that could it be that freedom, for some things, not for everything, but for some things, freedom is not that bad. Okay, sorry, what's happening next?
Please quit smoking too, Nikos. I mean, seriously, I can see it in your beard. I can see it in your beard. You got some ashes. No,
actually, I haven't smoked since. So I smoke I don't smoke a lot. And I haven't smoked a single cigarette since the 13th of February. But I never say to myself, I've quit. By the way, here's a good tip on how to quit. Don't tell yourself you're going to quit, because then it's this pressure, oh my God, I've quit. So I always have cigarettes around me.
Great idea. Great idea. The guy that hasn't smoked in 2 whole months is telling the guy with 10 years cigarette free, oh, no, don't quit smoking. Just keep some cigarettes in the other room and tell yourself you'll have one later. Great advice, everybody. All right. Anyway, we're going way too long. We got at the bottom in 30 minutes from now, back here on this very channel, the Ayn Rand Center UK, Don Watkins and James Valiant will discuss Of Living Death. Now that's a cool essay, name at least, and certainly it's a great essay as well by Ayn Rand. They're going to be discussing that. And then coming up at 9 UK time, Flirting with Reason, the hit show. It's beginning on YouTube for 30 minutes or so, then jumping over to Clubhouse.
So today we're talking about the friend zone.
Oh, God help
Everyone
us.
has been there, but we are approaching it, from a common people's perspective, but also I'm bringing in the example of Dostoevsky and his hero in the book, in the story White Knights, because I think that's the best capture of the friend zone in literature ever. And every day in the 4 days of the relationship of the poor guy with what's her name, Natasha or whatever, is like one stage in the progress towards the friend zone, which is this quicksand that gets you in, and once you're in, good luck getting out.
It sounds almost, the friend zone sounds like a cope, if I hadn't made this one mistake, I'd have a chance, doesn't it? Anyway, it doesn't. You guys will figure it out. I'll be watching. We'll all be watching. Looking forward to that. And guys, remember, back here in 29 minutes of Living Death.
Are we having Clubhouse?
Yeah, we're jumping over to Clubhouse right now. See you there. We want to know what you think. Light them if you got them. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for the super chatters, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.